Hi, I'm Samuel Prather. Welcome to A Reason to Create. I've had my hands full for a long time. This is the first video I've done in a while. My wife and I just welcomed a new addition to our family. We're finally settled in a new house that is 120 years old, so there's lots of work that had to be done and still needs to be done. But that's not why we're here. So what I wanted to cover today was something that has been in the works for a very long time, which is I wanted to cover how to use jazz drum samples within reason and whatever DAW that you might be using to get a more realistic sound. And you might be saying, like, why do I need different sounds or samples to make jazz? Well, the reason you want to make sure that you're using the right sounds is you want the experience for the listener to be as authentic as possible. Just because we're programming stuff doesn't mean that it doesn't have to sound as good as we can make it sound. And by using the right samples, you can really add a level of class and nuance that might not otherwise be present. Another really cool thing about jazz samples is that the drums tend to be tuned higher. So the toms are higher, the snare is higher, the kick is higher, and what that does is it leaves a different space in the sonic layout for you mixing wise. One of the things that I really love to do is have jazz drums as an overlay for something that's electronic. Or maybe you might just want a more open bass drum sound, like if you think about Motown back in the day. They didn't have just like a thud for the kick. It was really actually like a boom, boom. It was a more melodic and almost singing kind of tone that the bass drum used to have. If you're new to jazz, I would encourage you to check out players like Roy Haynes, Brian Blade, Eric Harlan. Their drum sound is very different from the usual kind of 22-inch kick thing that we hear more often in hip hop and rap. Now, that's not to be said that jazz can't be played with a bigger drum kit or with, a kit that has less resonant sounds. People like Dave Weckl and Vinnie Colaiuta have been very successful on lots of jazz recordings with tones that are not traditionally associated with jazz. However, that doesn't mean that the tones that are traditionally associated with jazz don't have value on their own. And I'm going to teach you how to do that today and also give you a link to a website that has some great samples for free. So just stick around to the end and I'll make sure that you get hooked up with that info. Generally speaking, it's been pretty difficult to find jazz drum samples. If you do a search on your own, I think you'll run into the same problems that I've been running into, which is that I guess jazz is not that popular a genre of music these days. And also the complexity, I think, makes it a challenge to make good jazz drum samples. It probably doesn't help that jazz kits tend to be smaller in the overall scheme of things. So instead of it being like 12, 13, 16, it might just be like 10 or 12 and 14. It's smaller drums. They're pitched higher and a lot of people don't have them. Also, from a programming standpoint, I think jazz drums need more dynamic range. There's a lot more sounds that a jazz drummer gets out of the drum set than I think most drummers in other genres might be trying to do. Like, for example, instead of it just being an open snare hit in the center at different volumes, it might be a snare hit that's muffled, or it might be a snare hit that gets a bit of the rim, or it might be just on the edge of the drum but left open so that it can still ring a little bit. There's a lot of variance just on the snare drum alone. Don't get me started on the hi-hat and hitting on the side of the drums and the ride cymbal and all the different approaches that are used in jazz that are very difficult to sample and also to program. I recently ran into some samples from a company called Virtuosity that were actually really beautiful as far as the cans themselves, like the toms and the snare and the kick drum. Like, everything sounded really great and traditional. The only thing I didn't like about it was maybe the cymbal options. But because Reason is modular, there's no reason not to just use the toms and just the parts of the cymbals that we like and mix it in with other things that we do like in terms of the cymbals. Here's an example of some typical jazz playing that is with a regular kind of Reason drum kit. Here's the exact same MIDI information being interpreted with the Virtuosity drum samples. It's a huge difference. It's really night and day. And it might be the difference between your track sounding like jazz and sounding like somebody who doesn't know what they're doing. It's insane that samples this quality are free. This is absolutely bananas. So get these samples before they change their mind. I'm gonna put a link to their YouTube description of the product so you can hear what they have to say about it. Or if you just want to go straight to the samples and you're already sold on it, then I'll put a link as well in the description, just straight up to the download link. Have you heard of Virtuosity? Have you used these samples before? Let me know down in the comments whether or not you think they make a big enough difference for you to download and use in your own work. And if you download these samples and you love them, then maybe visit back to the channel, like, subscribe, or watch some more videos, share with a friend. All that stuff really helps me out in terms of building the brand and the channel and allows me to spend more time doing more videos. I hope you learned something today. I'm Samuel Prather. I hope that I gave you a reason to create.